So, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome back again to day 2 of the Auroville Festival, where once again we explore the quality of sincerity. But the aspect that we explore today is that of Mahakali, one of the 4 powers of the mother. So welcome, and inviting Nilima to just introduce the people today who are going to be part of this discussion on Mahakali. The power, resolute will, and impetus to act.
Thank you, Sudha. Good afternoon, everyone. So we have today Dr. Belu Mehra. Dr. Mehra is a senior academic mentor at Aurobharti Sri Aurobindo Society. She's one of the Society's monthly online journal, editor of the monthly journal, Renaissance, and she has a PhD in education from University of Illinois and a master's in economics from Delhi School of Economics. For 10 years, Dr. Mehra worked as a professor in the US before moving to Pondicherry in 2007. She moved to Pondicherry especially to focus her work on Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's works. She writes in various journals and is also the curator for Sri Aurobindo's Action Journal, and a book titled Understanding Contemporary India in the Light of Sri Aurobindo was recently published by the Sri Aurobindo Society. Welcome, Dr. Mehra. We then have with us today Jyoti Charles. Jyoti has been studying Sri Aurobindo and the mother since the age of 24. After graduation in engineering and serving for 13 years in Indian Air Force and the National Institute of Port Management, he resigned to join Auroville in 2002. He has worked here as an electrical engineer and as a teacher for 13 years and transcribed and edited 2 books on the recorded memories of Aurovillians and Ashramites who had the darshan of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. At present, Jyoti contributes through articles and e-cards inspired from his study on the subject and from the works of the mother and Sri Aurobindo to spread their teachings so that the new consciousness may grow in Auroville, in India, and the rest of the world. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have Shailaja Chatlur with us. Shailaja is an actor, entrepreneur, and a filmmaker with about 30 years' experience in Tamil theatre, television, cinema, and new media platforms. Shailaja's social endeavors include Cinema Rendezvous Trust that also runs the film club called Cinema Rendezvous 2. As an actor, she has worked with veterans like K. Balachandra, Shankar, and Naga. She's an executive committee member of the Chennai International Film Festival and is a visiting faculty in the National Institute of Fashion Technology. Through her Wanderlust Travel Lounge, she curates exclusive experiences around temples and national heritages. Welcome. We also have Tine, who would be joining us shortly. She's just on her way, was caught up in another assignment. And Tine is a long-term Aurovillian who came as a student in the early 80s, worked in services, businesses, and lives on a farm, engaged with green work. She's been part of the different working groups in Auroville and is presently the member of the working committee. So welcome everyone. Looking forward to a lovely session.
So, as we said, the aspect of the mother that we'll explore today is that of Mahakali, power. And power has different meanings and different connotations in today's context. But what we're going to be exploring is what the power of the mother is. Just to give a context, and we may have read this, we're familiar, but for the benefit of our audience, I'm just going to read what Mahakali, the aspect of the mother as shared by Sri Aurobindo. Mahakali is of another nature, not wideness, but height. Not wisdom, but force and strength are her peculiar power. There is in her an overwhelming intensity, a mighty passion of force to achieve, a divine violence rushing to shatter every limit and obstacle. All her divinity leaps out in a splendor of tempestuous action. She's there for swiftness, for the immediately effective process, the rapid and direct stroke, the frontal assault that carries everything before it. Terrible is her face to the Asura, dangerous and ruthless her moods against the haters of the divine. For she is the warrior of the worlds, who never shrinks from the battle. Intolerant of imperfection, she deals roughly with all in man that is unwilling, and she is severe to all that is obstinately ignorant and obscure. Her wrath is immediate and dire against treachery and falsehood and malignity. Ill will is smitten at once by her scourge. Indifference, negligence, and sloth in the divine work she cannot bear, and she smites awake at once with sharp pain, if need be, the ultimate slumber and the loiterer. The impulses that are swift and straight and frank, the movements that are unreserved and absolute, the aspiration that mounts in flame are the motion of Mahakali. Her spirit is tameless, her vision and will are high and far-reaching like the flight of an eagle. Her feet are rapid on the upward way, and her hands are outstretched to strike and to succor. For she too is the mother, and her love is as intense as her wrath, and she has a deep and passionate kindness. When she is allowed to intervene in her strength, then in one moment are broken like things without sustenance, the obstacles that immobilize or the enemies that assail the seeker. If her anger is dreadful to the hostile, and the vehemence of a pressure painful to the weak and timid, she is loved and worshipped by the great, the strong and the noble, for they feel that her blows beat what is rebellious in their material into strength and perfect truth. Hammer straight what is weary and perverse, and expel what is impure or defective. But for her, what is done in a day might have taken centuries. Without her, Ananda might be wide and grave or soft and sweet and beautiful, but would lose the flaming of joy of its most absolute intensities. To knowledge, she gives a conquering might, brings to beauty and harmony a high and mounting movement, and imparts to the slow and difficult labor, after perfection, an impetus that multiplies the power and shortens the long way. Nothing can satisfy her that falls short of the supreme ecstasies, the highest heights, the noblest aims, and the largest vistas. Therefore, with her is the victorious force of the divine, and it is by grace of a fire and passion and speed if the great achievement can be done now rather than thereafter. So quite a powerful aspect of Mahakali. And today also the discussion is the aspect of power, the resolute will and the impetus to act. So in that sense, Dr. Mehra Velu, if I can call you, I'm inviting you to think about the perspective of intolerant of imperfection, Scrooge and Hammer, linking it with sincerity, the value or the quality that we're pursuing this week. Wrath is immediate and dire against treachery and falsehood and malignity. Ill will is smitten at once by her Scrooge. So given this line and given the context of what we spoke, what are your thoughts, what are your observations, and how does it come into play in daily life? Because I think it's more important about how can we be present to it in the daily life, knowing that as human beings pursuing spirituality, there is imperfection and yet there is perfection.
Yes.
So inviting you to share your thoughts.
Sure. Yes. Let me see. Hello? Yeah. Good. Thank you so much, Sudha, for reading out that beautiful passage from the Mother. And I happened to bring the book along with me. And as I was reading it, it's like, no matter how many times you've read or any of these passages, but now concentrating or meditating on Mahakali again, kind of like, it takes you to that place. And I was thinking exactly along the same lines in which you're asking the question about the daily life. How do we, is this working? Am I audible? What does it mean for me in daily life? I'll start with that. So this idea, which you just asked, intolerant of imperfection, and the way Sri Aurobindo continues that sentence, she deals roughly with all that is unwilling, and she's severe to all that is obstinately ignorant and obscure. Intolerant of imperfection, this comes, the wrath, the scourge, the hammer, all that intolerance comes very easily when we see the imperfection in the other, in somebody outside us. But the real challenge or the real power of Mahakali would be when I'm beginning to see this within me, and then do I have the courage to use that hammer to pull that what is unwilling in me. Because see, Mother and Sri Aurobindo both at many places have spoken about the power of Mahakali or the work of Mahakali connected with the work of progress and transformation. So Mahakali's main work is to facilitate quick progress, facilitate easy transformation. Easy not in the sense that it will be quick like that, but to clear the path for transformation. And once somebody had asked Sri Aurobindo, has there been anyone who has, with whom Mother has used the power of Mahakali for that person's, that sadhak's continuing progress? And he said, yes, there has been one, and in one stroke, so many of the old sanskaras and attachments and old patterns of the mind were gone. But most of us are not ready for that. So when it comes to this idea of being intolerant of imperfection, we are very quick to see, you are not doing it rightly. And in daily life, this is the work that, this is part of our regular experience, especially when we are working with others. And that's why Mother insisted so much on working with others, not just sitting in my own room and writing books and or articles after articles, but to collaborate with others on various projects, because that's where the rub happens on egos. And that's where conflicts happen, and that's where our own imperfections come out. But even in those situations, we quickly say, you are not doing it rightly. And every time there is that movement of anger, it's the beginning of that Mahakali force. That, even if I may not take out the hammer literally or figuratively, but if inside something is boiling because my colleague hasn't done the way I'd like to do things, or the way I would have liked her to do things, that would be, something we'll have to think about it. The other aspect, the other thing that I think is very interesting to keep in our front as we continue our conversation is that, and as you were reading, we often forget just as intense the force of Mahakali is, equally intense is her love. So in order to be worthy of that highly intense love, we have to be a little bit ruthless with our imperfections, stricter than usual with our imperfections if we want to deserve Mahakali's love. So, you know, that is very important. I think I'll take a pause here and see what my co-panelists have to say, and then we'll...
Yeah, so as you were sharing, for me, the images that came was, you look within, within the imperfections, and to see when there is a trigger, what does one really need to look about that.
Yeah.
And the rub and the friction when we are working with people, because that's when it gets intensifies, the trigger gets triggered, and when it is not, you're in peace and calm. But also the image of fire, flame, passion, intensity, which seems like you're there always, and I leave that, but also that there is a cooling. But for that cooling, there has to be this passage of fire. When and how does that cooling can even happen? Because one is, can I dry up from within if I'm constantly doing this work? And how do I therefore balance that? Do I balance that from within, or do I balance that from outside? So I would love to bring this back, and if you can just hold that, and maybe I don't know whether the others have that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question to come back to. But I'll just add one more thing in terms of linking it with sincerity. And I think this is the key here, to root out the imperfections. It is not the imperfections in the system outside, imperfection within me that we have to root out, and for that the ultimate test is sincerity. And at one place Mother said that to be sincerity, there cannot be true resolute will. So the connection between these aspects is also very interesting. So in that sense, I must congratulate whoever designed this theme, that to pick out these sub-themes within Sri Aurobindo's very elaborate description of Mahakali, and to identify things and connect them with sincerity. So that's very important, because hypocrisy is the first enemy of sincerity. And how do you root out hypocrisy if you don't have the courage to be very honest within? Honest to yourself, honest, of course, honest to the divine. You cannot deceive the divine, but we are very good at deceiving ourselves all the time, giving all kinds of excuses and justifications for our behavior. So there also, Mahakali will eventually act if we hold on to those hypocritical justifications of our own imperfections. So, yeah.
Thank you for that linking. So, Shailaja, given your background, swift, immediate effect done in a day, what might have taken 100 years. So while Belu brought the example of the mother demonstrating the power of that one action that allowed for the resolution of the samskaras for that person or that sadhaka, in your own work as a filmmaker and working with different themes, and what are some of the witnesses, examples that you may have from a historical perspective or from a live living experiential purpose of that, where that this effect can be swift and immediate, and it is in the here and the now, and or it could have taken 100 years. So one is, what is this line bringing available as a gift that we could be present to? What is it that we can see which probably the mind is not seeing, and how probably history or life examples has demonstrated that?
Thank you. So it's wonderful to be here, and I guess I wanted to start with Bonjour Voda and everything, because the whole idea of being inaudible excites me always. It immediately gives me a calm because there's an external movement of connecting with so many other cultures and nations and minds openly, because of which I find an inner peace. I find that very calming and nice. And I think we live in a world where sincerity is becoming less and less appreciated, required, where mediocrity is just passing off and is getting rewarded also, which puts you through a lot of self-questioning, self-introspection about what you're doing. And I think at that phase, for Auroville to have sincerity as the theme and do this is wonderful. So though it's like, okay, you're going to, as somebody outside who's admired things in Auroville, to come in here is exciting. And then you think, okay, you're talking, but I think the difference in talking in a forum like this to talking in some of the other forums, which I do in Chennai or other urban spaces, is that it immediately draws you again inside and makes you ask questions. You're preparing for a talk, but in the process, it's like meditation. It's unfolding a lot of answers within you. I think the whole thing, when you were reading the passage, just closing the eyes and sitting there, and as a filmmaker, visualizing things was very exciting for me. Listening to Mahakali in your words, mother's words, you reading it out, and sitting in this space which spells of the aesthetics of Auroville, I think did something to me beautiful. But in terms of my specific area of the subject, what I came prepared to as examples was a couple of things from my personal life where I work with orphan children. Like I'm making my feature film script, and it's based on questioning society's relationship with abundant children, about orphans. And one from that sphere, another from my entrepreneurship, from my business sphere. But I wanted to start off with reading something about my other area of work, which is my travel lounge in Savera. I took a group of them to the Statue of Unity, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's. We took a helicopter ride in Gujarat. And we went right after it was built, when it was being criticized. I come from Tamil media, which has a whole lot of people who are very anti-central government now. And I want to remain apolitical. I want to speak for or against, irrespective of whichever government is there. So I said, I'm fascinated with this. When I've been wanting to go to some place, look at a very, if I'm going to the Statue of Liberty, why am I not going to Statue of Unity in India? And I'm not going because everybody thinks it's not cool to go. Because I live, and my friends are all people from media here who are probably going to think, oh, why are you doing that? So I think constantly to be sincere to yourself and break free of these influences of peer pressure was interesting. So when I went there, that was the first time I really got to understand what Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had done for the unification of princely states. And I thought that was an act of Mahakali. So this morning while talking about it, I just wanted to take that to the audience, some of whom may not be aware of this. Because Patel was not one of those leaders we constantly spoke about. Probably one line here in our history books we knew about who he was. So Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the first Home Minister of independent India, played a historic role in the negotiation with the rulers of the princely states firmly but diplomatically, and brought most of them into the Indian Union. It was his success in integrating about 565 princely states after independence that got him the title of Iron Man. So 562 independent states were given the free choice to join the Dominion of India or Pakistan or to remain independent. And most of these princely states were kept that way. They were not directly under the crown, but were in a way under them, but were given that autonomy to some extent. While some things were with the British Crown, they were given that autonomy, like it's like divide and rule, or they are their watchdogs. They report to us. It's a way of balancing mechanism, which comes part of high thinking of administrative abilities. So there are these 500 odd states. And so what happens is he took on the charge in July 1947. With the point of swiftness, within August 47, he had a number of those states agree to become part of it. And it wasn't easy. So it's about, I think, operationally what you do. You first get hold of things that change. And then you work on the more difficult things. Like when we write exams, we have strategies. I think we become Mahakali in so many places. Because I think basically the thing about being Mahakali is that you have to have the overwhelming will you were talking about, willpower. And then you have to have a certain superior forcefulness. But all this will work only when there is knowledge and strength of vision and conviction, passion, because of which the swiftness will come, wherein you can actualize thoughts. I think that's the essence of Mahakali for me. And I found that Vallabhbhai Patel was precisely doing this, the way he operated with all the different princely states. And it is interesting to note that he used two predominant arguments with all the different state heads. So one, he moved quickly to different states, and then he gave this whole logic of patriotism, you know, your blood kind of thing. And another way, so I think a Mahakali is benevolently manipulative. When you have knowledge, I think it's like the mother. I'm a mother of two children, 30 and 25. I've seen them grow. And you know, in this world which is getting digitized and changing so much, I know how much you play. I mean, the simple thing of when you feed a child. I remember feeding my child, breastfeeding. And at one point, my little infant bit me. And I gave it one tap because it hurt me. I know it sounds so unkind, but not that it really hurt the child, but that little thing. So it's you're reaching to that impulsive thing where the child knows, okay, if I bite, it's not good. And this whole fact that I can say this in front of this audience, to find the strength as a woman from Tamil Nadu, Tamil Pomble, you have to live within these norms. To come and say this, to touch myself here and say that, I think takes courage, and that's the strength I have found. And I find that strength in a large national level, which I became very proud of only as an adult. So he used patriotism, and another one was that he manipulated, I would say manipulation, though it's a negative word, that he said there was some princely amount they got. If they became part of the union, they got some perks. So it's about knowing the reward system. So I see Shakti there. I see Mahakali there. I see the power there. I see the swiftness, the forcefulness, the will, the passion, the conviction. Because many times we lack the conviction to do what we know something, we've gathered the data, we're determined, but I'm going to be worried because if I say something, is he going to dislike me? That's going to shake my conviction. I want to be accepted. Typically, as a woman from India, from Tamil Nadu, coming from a middle class, upper middle class, where you want to get everyone's approval, that has been one of my biggest battles. And I think as a political leader, to find your voice, to find your conviction and work for it, because one part of the world is going to clap for you. The other part is there is going to be suffering. There is going to be scourge. You are going to suffer. People are not going to look at you the way you want all of them to look at you. So I think that was a big act in the national level. And I would talk about a probation officer called, let me call her Kala. Let me call her K. Okay, she's a probation officer I worked with, who works with juvenile children. And we had a case of a 14-year-old sex worker who had undergone some, she's a juvenile, and 2 days of captive, multiple sex partners abusing her. And what had happened is that, I'm not going to go into the details, it's an elaborate system where 14 departments of the government work to rescue these children. And when we rescued this child, I remember the way the probation officer worked. I suddenly saw her. She was from a small town, not majorly educated, hardly knew English. But she was charged on Bharadiyar because her father taught her all the Bharadiyar poems. Bharadiyar is one of our very progressive writers in Tamil Nadu. And you know, she made a quick call because there were some politicians, and the act of crime was conducted inside a police station. And there were politicians from various different parties involved in this. So the way she acted on it was very interesting for me. How she went about it, and how you have to stay by the rule, but to be always right, you should know what to take under and what to take under. When I say take under, it's about knowing what is good for the girl. If you're basically working for the juvenile child, it's like, I think if there is a rape victim, I think every time you don't have to pick a battle and put it. There have been times when I've thought, you just take care of that child there. It's okay. Nobody needs to know. Maybe this is not part of the bigger battle you're fighting, because it's a call you take. Whether fighting the system is important or fighting for the child who's been abused. So sometimes you just decide, move her somewhere else, do something else where we hold her together. Is she strong enough to stand the battle? So these are those knowledge and wisdom and vision which comes in when you're working in the Mahakali mode, I feel. And I remember a young girl who actually wanted to speak about, like everybody spoke about, why Me Too? Why should you talk if it's something happened 15, 20 years ago? Why are you talking about it now? But I remember this girl, the way she went about it, and why she wanted to speak about it, and why she didn't wait for anybody else to take the cause. She had grown up, she had got the conviction and the vision to confront it direct. Because many times I feel, oh, I want to speak about something that person did, I need him beside me. I need to convince her to stand beside me. I think a Mahakali is swift and fierce. She's a warrior who is not just impulsive. The impulsiveness comes from deep conviction, which is honed over experience and logic. I think that girl's vision, or I know another a woman who decided, this is sometimes you work swiftly. Sometimes, like I said, you wait for somebody who's abusing you or something wrong happening in society. You wait for the facts to present itself. There's a smartness which comes with that. If something is going wrong, it's about when to fight something. Those choices are made in a warrior-like mode. It's like you're on war front. It's about quick decisions then. And I think, so I have another friend of mine, an entrepreneur, whose business was divided majorly because her father-in-law had a second wife who had 3 children. So I'm talking about practical application of the Mahakali situation. Because I think the whole idea when we have all these itihasas, Puranas, the mythological characters, the gods and goddesses, they look very weird. Not just in Indian mythology. You go to any of the other mythologies, the stories, you find them so many snakes, the hair is like snakes. It looks very attractive, and then you're talking about the right and wrong, whether she was wronged, and if you speak about Hydra, or you speak about Mahakali, or the Ratri, the Devi, or any of the Shakti avatarams, the female goddesses, they look fierce and weird and sometimes repulsive. Like Mahakali is Kala, which is time or blackness, and I'm sure you're going to be talking about all the symbolism and all that. So sometimes it's too fierce. It can turn you off sometimes. You think, what is this? Because we moved into a certain kind of thinking what God should be. That God should be gentlemanly. That God should be this, God should be that. But I think God is basically representation, manifestations of concepts and ideas. And it is left to us to interpret it the way we want to. The rules are there. The examples are given. And from the examples we learn. And it is in that way that I'm giving you these examples which I think. So this lady who's a very successful entrepreneur, at the death of the father-in-law, finds that the second wife and her 2 children have a big stake in the business. And what do you do about it? So she just decides that, okay, what is to be given to them, I'll give it very clearly, but I'm going to get the business shareholding separate. So the way she operated on it, knowing facts, knowing laws, and also having morals and ethics. Also understanding that the other woman trusted the man and got married too, and has 2 children. So something has to reach them. It reaches them. But being smart enough to guard your boundaries and to take it back to the core of what the whole business empire should be. Where was it started? Is that going to get diluted? That's an important question any organization asks oneself, right? As a person, we ask, I set out to do something. Am I changing in that? So all these questioning and swiftly moving, bringing corrections is an embodiment of Mahakali for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailaja, for that. And it's quite a different, I think many different landscapes that you brought in from the example of how Mahakali as a power gets done. But what I heard you say is when there is clarity, when there is power of conviction, the swiftness to ask because it's coming from that. But what an interesting perspective, one of the facts that you brought was the ability to hold that power. And when there is structure and when there is rules and regulations. And when my clarity or my conviction or my ability to stay course doesn't, or let's say colludes or collides with another that is different, then what happens? So taking on from, the sincerity is there in both, you cannot really doubt. The child was as much as a sincere in his own ignorance, as much as the mother, in her own ignorance, what she had to do. But when there is a collision, then the aspect of Mahakali, how does one balance it out? How does one bring in the dialoguing? Like you said, how do I choose the battles? And in choosing the battles, how do I also collaborate? Because both are very clear. Both have conviction. And coming to that aspect to you, Jyoti, is that the actions of Durga, the Kali, the Mahakali, and the way of the Supreme Mother. So, what aspects, the deeper and the subtle aspects of this? Because one, yes, we talk about force. But there is so much to it than just the force, the passion, the courage. And the sincerity element of it, or what are the other elements that needs to bring in when action is needed? But what sort of action? When it's an individual versus the collective. Or not versus, let me correct that, individual and the collective. So.
Yeah, can you speak without this?
No, we need to record.
I have the exact words from the mother to answer this question you finally said. Can I read it?
Yes, please.
I don't know, some people do not like reading quotes. But better than explaining with my own words, to read from her words. Just a small paragraph only. And for human consciousness, it takes long. Here she's talking about individual attitude towards a collective or the world or society. For human consciousness, it takes long. But as he remarked just before, it is pretty. It feels like something going like this, a gesture like a tide spreading out. Tide spreading out. Very slowly for the human consciousness. Certainly, but quite implacable towards resistances and sovereignly sure of victory. That's pretty. These are mother's words, a conversation from the agenda. And with the least amount of damage, undeniably. So like a tide. Because when a tide comes, you have time to move away from it. No hurry, no fear. It's not a tsunami. This is how mother wants things to be done. This is what she adopted. Many people used to complain to her, why don't you bring the Mahakali force and get it done immediately, smash it, do it immediately, everything. She said, I can't do that because I had to prepare the base for it. Otherwise, the force is too big for the world. Then with the least amount of damage, undeniably, not to mention that what looks like damage may only be seen in the whole, a means of higher realization. There will be damages, nothing can be done without damage. Even if you walk on the floor, on the road, you very carefully, we kill a lot of germs. When you drink a glass of water, a lot of life get killed. It is impossible in the present state of human body to live without destroying other lives. Our vegetables we eat, that is also one's life. Vegetables, fruits, everything is life. So we survive by destroying other life. This is physical nature, physical law. But in the same way, when the Mahakali acts, I'm not talking about Mahakali, here she's talking about the new consciousness, which spreads like a tide, slowly. But there will be some destruction. Damage may only be seen in the whole, a means of higher realization. That damage is for higher realization. That's what she says. And about Mahakali, I would like to share one small thought here, which I read also. It is very rarely she acts. Very rarely. Like Belu was saying, only one occasion. I've also been reading Sri Aurobindo Mother's literature since I was 24. I have rarely seen any mention about them describing Mahakali's action. Very rarely, because it's a too big, huge force. They don't talk about it only very rarely in some occasion, and so that is the reason why we can't talk much about that. But I feel in the world scenario, like for example the French Revolution, that is something I feel the action of Mahakali. Because Sri Aurobindo writes, when Mahakali acts, nothing is left untouched. Everything is touched. It is not a very focused force, it is a wide force. So you know what happened in Europe? Lot of bloodshed. So that I think is a very good example of action of Mahakali. Sri Aurobindo himself wrote an aphorism that Napoleon he saw as a god striding over Europe. So it's that. Anything more?
Can I just add one or two things? There are a couple of other letters in agenda of Sat Prem really writing to mother and saying, bring your Mahakali force, bring your Mahakali force. And the troubles that he mentioned specifically, which were bothering him, were resistance, inertia, falling back into his old patterns, and every morning waking up with that old mindset that was resistant to change. So it's like, not easy. There is another letter of Sri Aurobindo where he says there are two conditions for Mahakali's force to work. One is that there has to be that calm inner being. Then this force can work. Because otherwise, if it's a lot in turmoil, the force will do so much damage that it can, have a negative rather than the positive impact that it is supposed to have for progress and transformation. And the second thing is that the person on whom, the sadhak on whom, or whether it is individually or collectively as a society, as a nation, as humanity, when we will not be looking at mother's Mahakali force as take it otherwise, that mother doesn't love me anymore. And she's doing this because I have been bad, or I have not done this or not done that, but rather take it as a blessing. So to whom mother applies this Mahakali force, with whom she knows that they have that intimate connection with her, intimate relation with her, that they will see Mahakali's force also as a blessing. So for that also we have to become adhikari of that. We have to rise up in our capability to accept that Mahakali's swift, impetuous wrath as a blessing to take us further. So that's very thing. And just one other quick thing I wanted to mention, Shailaja, I was listening to you, I was fascinated with several of the examples. I think in Sri Aurobindo's case, in this Mahakali, he makes it very clear distinction between Kali and Mahakali. So this Mahakali is not black in appearance. It is gold. It's the golden light that is the Mahakali light. Mother and Sri Aurobindo both have made it very clear. It's the Kali of the vital plane, which is which has been given this form of black with skulls and things like that. So that's an important distinction when we are speaking of Mahakali force. So I thought I'll just add that point. So thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. So in your thing of Jyoti, and I would like to kind of also take that question before I invite Teen to add one aspect. So power has structures. Power has rules as well. Like if you look at a system, because there is a self and there is also a system. When it is self, it makes it easy because it's my relationship with the divine and I can progress. There is self and the system. Wherever, whether it is a home, whether it is a society, whether it is an institution, an organization, a country or national, a tribe, you name it. There is a self-organizing system, just like this body is. When we look at Mahakali in that aspect, and then there is what Belu was mentioning, the resistance or the imperfections that come up. There is an opinion, and then there is the impetus to act, which arises from one's own conviction, perhaps, the clarity that person, depending on what stage of growth is, and a whole lot of other layers. It doesn't seem as simple as we think it is. In that aspect, how does one really harness the power of Mahakali? How does one really connect to that or aspire for that? in such a way that the clear being that she was mentioning is actually expressed. So wherever you are, you're able to not just be that, but you're also probably able to inspire that, or probably able to demonstrate it. Because what we're seeing today across the world is the resistance to a structure and to a certain rule of, whether it's a being or a becoming. And somewhere the righteousness coming is what I think and what I feel, or what I think is the way of the action, is the only way, perhaps. And where there is a certain amount of discounting that happens. So in that context, through your readings or through your experiences, what would you like to share?
Well, again, I would like to recount here what Mother generally spoke about gods and goddesses. You may be knowing already. It is that she said they belong to a certain plane called overmental plane, which is still not a plane of truth consciousness. It is still a plane of where the division actually starts. So she was not in favor of Kali, real Kali. No, there are a lot of small Kalis we have in every house and every street and every small temple. These are all actually may not be real divine beings of the overmental plane. They may be there, may not be there. But mostly, Mother has said many times that these are vital beings. Vital is a lower consciousness belonging to the earth, or above the earth. So these beings may not be really divine. They may be actually hostile beings. They are just feeding on the bhakti, devotion people ignorantly give them. So there are a lot of these Kalis and people trust and believe in them. It may be good for them in a way. That's another subject. We have to have another meeting to discuss that. How even somebody who is believing in something with faith can still progress, even though that may be a false god. That is another subject. Now, coming back to what Mother is advising is that these are a overmental being. Now, our adoration should go only to the Supreme. And among these gods, she wanted these gods to manifest on earth and transform themselves. She wanted that. And she asked many of them. Shiva refused. Krishna agreed. He descended on 24th November 1926. Into physical consciousness. He didn't take a physical body. None of the gods took a physical body. Durga, she was the one who finally agreed to surrender to the Supreme. Mother says Durga merged with the Supreme. And she says, after that I stopped giving blessings for the Durga Puja. There's no need. She has merged with the Supreme. So her vision, we are talking about the future world, the future evolution, a supramental evolution, which is a higher stage. If Auroville is established for that and we are all working for share with our Mother's ideals and vision, this is something we should always keep foremost in our thoughts, in our life also, wherever we act. Because it is a great future that is awaiting at the door for us to open to it so that it can manifest. And for that, it is necessary to be released from these gods also, not only from the asuras, but the gods also in a way. Satprem wrote somewhere, we have to release ourselves from the gods also. And Mother herself, you can find in many occasions, many instances on the agenda, where she says that she wants these, I don't want this Kali and all to descend. What will happen? Everything will be destroyed. There will be a pralaya sort of a thing. Everything will be taken back and again it will be recreated. Nothing will be sustained, nothing will be surviving from what was achieved in the previous manifestation. A lot of pralayas have taken place. In Hindu tradition, it is believed that there are many pralayas. Mother says 6 pralayas have happened. This is the 7th manifestation. There will be no pralaya for this, she said. In that way, she doesn't want that kind of destruction. I don't want that kind of destruction. I want love to triumph now. That's what she says. She was manifestation of love, divine love. So, and she always controlled them because they were her children. She said, they are my children. Durga, Kaliya, they are my children. Even asuras are her children, she said that also. So they are my children. So naturally when Mother is facing some hostility from the world, she manifested in the human body in the world, and when there was hostility, attacks, severe attacks she suffered in the world from among the people themselves who were there, many people close by were there. They were attacked from them, through them. Some force ignorantly used them, manipulated them, and they were attacking her. So they wanted to rush in and demolish everything. They can. Mother says that this humanity is a teeming thing. They are very great forces, the cosmic forces. Their power is tremendous. And if Mother had allowed them, they would have smashed down everything. She didn't want that. She firmly said no. We want a transformation. We don't want destruction. That's why that example you asked, good question. That change will be like a tide, so that everybody, destruction will be minimal. Transformation will happen. Surely it will happen. Victoriously, sovereignly, it will happen. So those are things. Have I answered you?
Thank you. I mean, I liked the hope in that. It gives a lot of, faith that the tide will live, but it is for destruction happen, but maybe of what needs to really be left behind. And that transformation is there. It's just maybe to trust that.
Yes.
And as she said, allow the love to flow. And on that note, Tini, one of the aspects that we were exploring of Mahakali, while we explored her intensity, her passion, her courage, her height, and all of that, I think what we were all bubbling with was her immense love and her joy, and that she bestows that too. So what would that look like, and what would that feel like? What would that be if there is any, that flaming joy, if there is, in your experience or in your reading, if you could just share that, because I think it's very fascinating to talk about, and I see that, coming in, but also to bring in that subtle and the beautiful, soothing, calming love and joy that her presence is. So.
Yes. I hope my voice is okay. I had a little bit of a hoarse voice, the cold in the morning. So the Mahakali, we certainly need that energy for the transformation. Does this work?
Yeah, just take it holy flow.
And we need that certainly, because transformation is not possible in our consciousness to happen without that. We are demolishing all that inconscience and the ignorance and what all comes with, because we are coming from there. So all these things which we are unconscious of, which has to go, and we have to get through with it and go up into the light. And Mahakali is a wonderful help in that, to help us getting rid of the obstacles. And then while you are on that way, while you are surrendering and rejecting the falsehood and all that, you are coming into another realm. And that realm then opens up not in the struggle and in the fight and in the war against the Asura, but also this incredible love of the mother who wants you to transform your human nature, to come to another, to get another being, to become another being and leave whatever you are, what we are now, leave that behind and grow into something else. We don't even know what this will be. But there is a lot of things which we will have to leave behind, and there Mahakali will help. And she will, for example, when you see something beautiful and you enjoy that beautiful flower or moment or whatever it is, then she can add to that. If you open to her, she will add to this not only a fleeting joy, but like a bliss, something which is blissful even, something which is going close to Ananda, which is like, we don't know yet how the Ananda will be experienced, but we have to slowly grow into this. And as soon, we all have this experience when we are getting rid of some of our mistakes or faults or bad habits. Suddenly you can feel that they are behind and you are able to react in a different way. That brings a completely new joy. Oh, I'm out of this. Oh, I have overcome this. Oh, I'm not that old person anymore who has to get angry at this or that. I can react now with a smile and it doesn't affect me. And then this way goes higher and higher, and then we open up to those heights of Mahakali, who is the mother with a very loving intensity of a passion, who pushes you forward, and you want that passion, that joy, but comes to it, which has no bounds, no boundaries. It's not a destructive force, but it comes after the destruction of the falsehood has already happened. You are free from it, and then you can experience the world and your life in a different way. And this, I think we all experience this in a more or less let's say, daily life, where we, even in small things, where we can see we are changing, and that gives an incredible joy, isn't it? So this is still waiting. I think Mahakali will work later together with another force, which is the Ananda force. And this together, we have to prepare our bodies to be able to hold this joy, this beauty, this passion, this bliss. It is as difficult as we are going through a war. It is not the painful side, but it is the beautiful side. And when the cells are starting to dance in your body, and you are, not a vital joy, but just opening up to something really divine, the body has to get prepared to be able to hold that force. So she's preparing us for that by destroying the falsehood and pushing us forward and further. So Mahakali, actually, that aspect is often forgotten. We identify, or we are seeing often she's worshipped in the lower forms, but the higher forms are there, and if we invite them, and if we are mature enough to understand and to grow towards that, this is an immense help on our path to get clean of our past and create a new life for us and everybody around us.
Thank you so much for that. And any last few words, closure?
I just wanted to add, thanks for the differentiation to Dr. Mehra and Jyoti sir in terms of, because most of you may have read so much about Mother. I wouldn't have gone so deeply. That differentiation was interesting. But the other point, because you'd asked me for the examples, the other thing I was thinking of was this self-realization part of it, which I think Kali or Devi or the feminine Shakti, because I'm basically looking at it, because of the Indian philosophy, we're looking at it as thought and potential energy as a male form, you're looking at action and kinetic energy as a female form. And I think somewhere this with Mahakali, I've always thought it's about self-realization. If I looked at any, so there's somewhere you have the tools to cut yourself down, come out of the previous avatar of yourselves and evolve into something better. So you have the benevolence of Mother Goddess for this. And you have the ways, and somewhere you got to find the means to have the magic of all that you were saying. So constantly that self-realization I think is very interesting, and which is what I think most of these belief systems do to us. So it's lovely to hear everyone sit here and listen to everyone than just reading a book. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Shailaja. Yeah, I'll just invite if anyone has questions. I think he also has.
Yes. Thank you for that interesting talk, all of you. I have few questions, three-part question rather. So the first one is to Shailaja. The topic being resolute will. And there is also this calm strength. And you nicely pointed out, reminded us about Patelji's contribution to India. Then there is also this figure of Subhash Chandra Bose. And then we also have our own Sri Aurobindo, who was right in the forefront of freedom fighting. And then he left all that and came to Auroville. So in terms of making the right choices, how do we, lesser mortals, make the right choices? At that moment, perhaps it would have felt like as if fighting for India was the largest cause. But then no, he felt that there is larger than that. And he came to Auroville and did his sadhana. That was part one. Second, to you, Jyotiji, we all have this, pressure of pleasing others, no? And we also, since our childhood, we say listen to the parents, listen to the elders, and this and that, and also to the boss. And then slowly it turns into a sense of servility to an extent, not just being its service. How does one make a distinctness between these two, the impetus to act while the impetus, knowing that it is not coming from the place of pleasing others. The impetus is to act resolutely towards something larger. And to you, Dr. Mehra, how do we reconcile? You talked about this wrath as a blessing. Then how do we look at these ongoing world events like Russo-Ukraine war, or let's say the Chinese oppression of the Uyghurs community? It's a very definite, resolute will to act against them. How do we yet understand that? Where do we draw the line? Where is the red line? How do we understand that? Thank you.
So I'll take the last question. I don't know about drawing the line because I think that also comes with our own inner perception, the growth in our inner perception. For some things, it may be easier for us to say, yeah, on the surface, this looks bad, Russia-Ukraine war, but maybe there is something good hidden in it. As long as I am not personally affected by it, right? We can intellectualize it, mentalize it, and say, this is also the destructive force of divine taking care of some things. But when a world situation or a situation in our own families or in our own communities erupts, which has a direct bearing on me, my life, that's where my ego's preferences come in. And that's when the real test comes. Can I see whatever is happening that may not be pleasant or pleasurable for me or comfortable for me, and still take it that, yes, this may be her way of pointing me to something within me which I may have to correct. This is something Mother again and again says every time there is a conflict. And I know I'm saying this, it's so easy to say. The real challenge is, to actually walk the talk. So I've been married long enough. Every day there is a new challenge, right? So every time there is a little argument, yeah, I have to remind the other person is a mirror, as Mother says, put in front of me to see my own weaknesses, to see my own perfections. Put this situation in the, just enlarge it to the larger context. The outside world is a mirror showing all of us individually everything that is wrong within us, everything that is false within us, which needs to be thrown out. Another important thing about Mahakali's force that Mother says at one place is that anything that is divine in essence and that is divine in its realization and that is truthful will not be destroyed by the force of Mahakali. It is only that which is the false and pretentious, hypocritical, or something that you don't need on your way to transformation. All that will be destroyed because this destruction part of the Mahakali is in the vital domain. She rarely acts in the mental domain. She works primarily in the higher domains where it's the force of love. And that's when Sri Aurobindo says that in integral yoga, the path of Krishna and Kali is the key to integral yoga. He's not talking about the lower vital world Kalis. He's talking of the Mahakali only. So Ananda and Mahakali, that's the two things that make the core of integral yoga in that sense. The Ananda and the force. So in that sense, you have to, it takes a lot of courage, I would say, a lot of force to say no. Whatever my husband is saying or whatever war is happening outside, it has only to do with what is wrong in the world, and nothing is wrong with me individually in an individual situation or with the players, with the world in general, for Mahakali to act in this way. So the line drawing thing happens as the inner perception grows, I think. That's what my answer would be. So the other questions other panelists can take up.
So, Lakshay, your question about discriminating between pleasing others, acting to please others, or impetus to please others, or otherwise, right?
Resolute will to act.
Resolute will to act. Yeah, that was the topic. But there is a wonderful thing, because of the descent of the new consciousness, the descent of supramental consciousness in 1956, in the atmosphere there is now a possibility for everyone who tries to know before acting, when he feels an impulse, impetus, whether it comes from falsehood or truth. It is possible. It was not possible before that, now it is possible. Now it is for each one to make an effort to discern. Mother gives a small help. She says that if you find an impetus giving you joy, faith, wideness, all these positive things, then it is an indication that it is from truth. If it creates in you despair, doubt, all those negative feelings, then it is an indication it is from falsehood. Test this, try it. Thank you.
Your question was about finding the conviction.
Yeah. About calm strength.
Calm strength.
Between, say, if you have to, Patelji, Bose and Sri Aurobindo, how do you decide?
So I can only speak from the experience of my work, and I keep reading a lot of spiritual stuff. I've been meditating, doing different things, and I think this basic respect, if we can maintain it for all life forms, so we are somewhere tuned in to see every other point of view. So in storytelling, especially when I'm doing screenplay, from whose angle is the story told? So I can look at this whole thing from different angles. So this ability we get to look at the same thing from different places, kind of gives us the empathy. And with that empathy, I would go to what he was saying in terms of if it's giving us that solace, that we're okay. But I go through a lot of crises with even small things like, can I quit this film unit? Because the project is extending too long and I can't take it anymore. It's coming into my family, domestic responsibilities. It puts me through a lot of crises, and I don't find the calm strength to decide it. I found the only thing that helped me was to look at it from various points of view, to somewhere nullify my ego totally, and suddenly I feel I'm part of a universal thing. I'm able to look at it from, you go so down that you actually get a bird's eye view. And that there somewhere, that will give me the calm and the answer to say, do I just cover up this case or do I take it up as a case against the system? Because it's often so difficult, because you are fighting to correct a system sometimes. If you're working with something like children or Me Too movement and stuff like that. When you want to correct it, but when do you there are times when you should not talk about it. There are times when you, so that realization comes from all of these things they said, and magically when I become so small, I go higher to get that calm strength, which once I reach there, I find, okay, I know I've decided, then I'm able to stick on to it. And from there is the strength, which is like, I would say, swift, and that impulsiveness is not just a sudden thing. It came from a lot of thought, which is what will give us that calm strength. And I think sometimes not talking, just keeping quiet has helped me, because by nature I'm a very talkative person. I can express myself with, so sometimes you realize you started using, instead of using 5 words, you're using 500 words. And then you need to take that step back. And probably those are the things that give us the calm strength to become more powerful and convinced about what we are doing.
You had a question?
Yeah, this is moreover an interactive kind of comment I would like to give. Maybe a sort of a mixed response. question I do have some. To me, I think French Revolution you mentioned, Daivam Chevatra Panchamam, right?
Can I just request you, running out of time, so if there is a question that you can ask, that will be super helpful. And we'll always have discussion, so we can have that. I'm just keeping mindful of the time.
Sure,
that's all.
sure.
Thanks.
The question then would be for you, Jyoti sir, and I will talk about probably in the discussion. I'll quote. I think that would be appropriate. It's a Gita, chapter 18, Daivam Chevatra Panchavam. The shlok start with Adhishtan. It's no brainer for me for two reasons. French Revolution is just one of the acts that happened with the divine intervention. But that was the fifth step, not the Adhishtan. Adhishtan has to happen for the first. Then you have Karta, Karna, and then Daivam. The resolute will and calmness, we'll talk in the discussion again. Again, it's no brainer for, it was a not brainer for me when I entered. I was slightly lost. I had to be calm, to be here, to meet her, and then talk to you and be in the present moment. The question is how the next intervention, if we assume, and I think I do believe that that is going to be a beauty, a transformational, slow, from the lowest level, the beauty that we want to see into individual level versus a tsunami kind of a wave coming in. How do we strike the balance when the urgency in the climate space today exists, where we have to have a decisive, people are talking about decisive decade, that urgency to happen probably from the top and from the bottom up to, the discussion. There are quite a few references in, again, Upadrushta, Anumantacha, there are quite a good references in Bhagavad Gita that we will talk about it later. But thank you for arranging this.
Thank you. Who would like? Was that a question, or you found your answer in articulating the question?
I think the question is still that how do, in the context of resiliency and the climate urgency, how do you strike that transformation?
Yeah, so in the situation when there is the force of bringing in that benevolent act and the resolute will, but also there's a sense of urgency and there's a decisiveness to be taken, how do you balance that? Yeah, who would like to answer that?
Yeah. I think I'm just going to share a small passage from the mother, which is something that she had mentioned in the context of sincerity in organizations. And I think it applies to kind of like collective life. And if we are talking particularly about like the climate situation, the environment thing, just a minute. I had that pointed it out and yeah. Okay. So this is in another agenda conversation. She said, at present, all human organizations are based on three things. One, the visible fact, which is a falsehood. Second, public opinion, another falsehood. And moral sense, which is a third falsehood. Mother laughs. So, ... silence. It's quite a telling conversation. See, entire system that we have, which we see today, which is rotten with all kinds of problems. Their falsehood is steeped so deep. You start picking it out from one end and it will come up on the surface from the other. How will you go about correcting that? The only solution is what Mother Sri Aurobindo emphasized is the spiritual solution. Sri Aurobindo makes it very clear, if this is not the solution, then there is no other solution. Right? So no matter how much tinkering we do to climate change through this organization, through this activism, through that, the falsehood will remain unless we take out the falsehood from within human consciousness, each one of us. The people who are working in the organizations, the moral sense, what she's saying, it is falsehood. I mean, you'll have to spend a lot of time deconstructing it and understanding what is the falsehood in the moral ethical sense? What is the falsehood in public opinion, right? So I think the answer lies somewhere in there itself. Urgency is our own transformation. That is the most urgent thing. Yeah?
To me, it's like sometimes like a race. Who is winning first? Is it the greed of mankind, or is it the aspiration for a higher life, which is pressing? And both things are in competition. So we are in a sort of a race between this, and everybody on the planet right now has to make a decision, consciously or unconsciously, where you are. Do you help this side or do you help that side? On which side are you? So the thing is that the side which goes for the transformation has an incredible impetus because the divine is behind it and it pulls it up. Just you open up to it, you're getting the help. So with that, things are changing and everything will fall into place. And if this happens fast enough, we can avoid a lot of destruction, which is otherwise happening. It's already happening. So how much destruction will happen until we finally learn to align ourselves to the highest truth and have it pulled down, that depends on us. It is not foreseeable. Does 50%, 30%, 90%, there will be destruction automatically because our consciousness is so low right now that we cannot avoid it. But we can avoid it by getting out of it. So this is a thing which will happen over generations. It will happen in the next 100, 200 years. We are part of it. And people are changing rapidly. They are changing rapidly. So, for example, climate change. Just one example of eating meat. You know, if everybody stops eating meat tomorrow, it will be an incredible change on the whole environmental impact, a positive change. So how do you convince people? You convince people by making it conscious how bad it is. You work in your own way of telling to your friends, your neighbors, your family, and so on. You know, even in Europe is much worse with the factory pigs and cows and whatever they're eating there. But there's so much input of, you know, food which goes to feed those animals. Just a small example. How much destruction is necessary to scrape the oceans empty of fish because we want to eat the fish? Just leave them, you know, leave them. We don't need all this. We can live in another way which is much more friendly to nature, to everybody. So people have to come at least on that level. It's not even spiritually. It's just making sense. You know, things like that. We have to see in what kind of race we are, how much destruction will still happen until we are finally coming out of it.
So thank you so much. I think this can go on and on. Yeah. And it's never enough, the time. And I think from different richness of perspectives, you know. But what I'm getting present to, and if I could just kind of bring in, is that where there is the benevolence of her love and her grace, what the impetus to act in the resolute will is from holding one's inner power with a kind of clarity, the conviction and the courage. And maybe along the way is to allow the discernment, you know, to guide. Sometimes may get off the track and to even discern that I have got the track. And in this, to make those kind of right choices, you know, and allow to be guided. And if one is a willing servitor of the divine consciousness and one is willing to surrender, to even trust that the grace is even bringing this for a higher purpose, which maybe I cannot see at this point in time, but to just trust that, you know. And I think we all are living examples, and I think it's just collectively to bring that trust into force and bring her advent a lot more faster and earlier, and not have her to destroy Because this line that says that of Mahakali is, rare are her interventions, for little is left untouched once her dance begins. So may we bring the dance of the love and the joy and the beatitude, the harmony, and not the other dance. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you also.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you for that amazing sharing, and hopefully we keep this dialogue alive. And thank you.